to the Bristol Break-up Club with me, Claire Black, and Stowe Family Law. The Bristol Break-up Club was set up a couple of years ago now by me and Stowe to provide group support for anyone who's navigating their way through a breakup or divorce in a safe and friendly environment with other people who are perhaps going through similar experiences. So just as a very brief introduction, my name is Claire Black. I'm a breakup and divorce coach and author of the book behind me, Breakup from Crisis to Confidence. I help my clients to navigate their way through the emotional ups and downs of their breakup with confidence and dignity. Stowe Family Law are the largest specialist family law firm in the UK, and they have offices all over the country. And they work very hard to provide the best service possible for all of their clients. And that includes collaborating with people like me and people like Caron, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, so that they can meet the needs of every client. And today, Stowe are represented here by Joanna Newton and Katie Jordan. Stephanie Bettis is our sort of resident financial advisor. She comes along to all our sessions, and she's the owner of Caron Financial Planning. Stephanie has over 20 years experience in financial services and works with clients through divorce to help them make the right financial decisions for their future. And today's special guest is Caron Kipping. Caron is the author of this amazingly brilliant book, Recognition to Recovery: How to Leave Your Abusive Ex Behind for Good. And Caron has 14 years, or probably more than that now, Caron, I guess, experience working in the domestic abuse field, as well as being a survivor of domestic abuse herself. So it's a real pleasure that I'm welcoming Caron along to come and talk with us today. It's a little bit of housekeeping. If you'd like to ask any questions, we absolutely welcome questions. You can do that through the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, or you can do it through the chat. Just be aware that on chat, I think you need to make sure that it only goes to panelists rather than to everybody if you want to remain anonymous. So without any further ado, thank you very much for coming in, Caron. How are you today? Are you well?
I'm very good, thank you, and thank you for having me. You know, we've met numerous times now, Claire. You know we love to talk as coaches, and you know, I'm really, you know, I love these webinars and these opportunities to kind of get the messages out to a big audience. It's so important, and just trying to find different ways to reach out to people, really.
Fantastic. So if you wouldn't mind, Caron, just at the beginning, giving us just a little bit of how you got to what you're doing now, and a little sort of sharing a little bit of your story.
Sure. So I was in an abusive marriage for over 10 years. It was my first serious relationship. I had no clue about red flags and warning signs or anything like that. And I suppose was very stereotypical victim of abuse, really, where I didn't really recognise any of the signs, and I just thought I was in a really unhappy, miserable relationship. And quite early on in that relationship, I knew that it wasn't right. I knew that I wanted to leave or to end the relationship, but I just didn't know how. And I didn't know how to explain it to anybody else either. So 10 years kind of went past, and 3 attempts to leave. And on the last attempt, I did actually leave, and naively thought that, you know, I would go through the legal kind of divorce and that kind of process. We had a young child by that time, and thought that, you know, life would be easier and better quite quickly afterwards. But what I didn't realise was that because my ex was very controlling and coercive, things actually got quite difficult, and in some ways were worse than when we were together at that time. So it took quite a long time to unravel from him. I learned some techniques that made things a little bit easier for me, and gradually, you know, life did improve and life did get better. But in that process, I ended up making some decisions that probably weren't the best decisions that I could have made, because again, you know, I was quite naive, didn't have anybody else around me that had ever been in this kind of situation, you know, before. So I lost my house, I ended up in lots of debt, I ended up losing my daughter to the person that was actually abusive to me. And it took quite a few years before things really kind of turned around. So after I recovered, I then started volunteering at a domestic abuse charity. And so I trained as a domestic violence specialist, an IDVA, and I've been there for 16 years now, working and training professionals and supporting women in the main that have been getting out of quite high risk relationships. And 3 years ago, I diversified a little bit and went into coaching, and so now I support people that are divorcing and separating from controlling and coercive partners. So it's just like a different kind of service, and I love it because it's very I suppose bespoke, and you know, I can support my clients for much longer, and you have a much more kind of personal relationship with them. So yeah. Do
you find that you often work with your clients for, you know, several years sometimes?
Yeah. So I've got a client at the moment who I've had since I first set up 3 years ago, and obviously she's not been coming to me regularly that whole 3 years. She's been a client that's dipped in and out as and when she's needed things, because she is now going to separate from her very coercive husband, but she's got 2 young children. And so, you know, coming to that point where she feels confident enough that that is the absolute right decision has taken that 3 years. So, you know, sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You know, you've got to be in the right mindset. You've got to be confident that it is the right decision before you push that button. So yeah.
I mean, one of the things that that I know from my work as well is that, you know, a lot of people don't leave straight away. And a lot of questions are asking, why don't you leave? What are the kind of common things do you think that mean that people stay in relationship when they've got that feeling of it's not quite right, but not quite sure how or if to get out?
Yeah, that's something that we hear a lot, you know, why don't you just leave? And then other people say, oh, well, if, you know, if my partner was behaving like that towards me, I'd leave at the first sign. But you don't, because they're not horrible all the time. They're quite nice some of the times. And when they're nice, that gives you hope. So you stay, you back down. You don't want to be the person to break up the marriage or break up the family. So it's a lot of responsibility that you take on board for the other person's behaviour. You're also very worried about what life is going to be like afterwards. You know, you're worried about how you're going to survive financially, worried about where you're going to live, whether they're going to make things really difficult for you, whether they're going to turn the children against you, whether other people are going to believe you, particularly if it's not been physical abuse. And you feel very isolated. You know, usually you've lost, you know, friends, family, you don't have a lot of contact with the outside world. So, you know, the voice that you're hearing is the abuser's voice, which is very loud. And it's difficult to have enough courage to, you know, to leave or to end the relationship. So yeah, quite often it does take a few times. I think the average is about 8 times for people to leave. It took me 3 times. And I definitely felt different on the 3rd time, because you have to emotionally disconnect from that person. You have to tell yourself that it doesn't matter if they cry, if they plead, if they beg, if they threaten, you know, it doesn't matter, whatever they do, I am done. And when you can say that with confidence, then you know that you're in the right kind of mindset, because you've got to be strong. You've got to be emotionally detached from that person when they're so controlling. Yeah.
Have you got any particular tips or strategies that, you know, if there's anybody watching who's in that situation, that they could use to start to get to that point of feeling emotionally detached enough and strong enough to be able to leave?
Yeah, sure. So one of the techniques that I tell people about a lot, is quite a powerful technique, is what I call my brave the wave technique.
Yeah.
So that's in a book, and that is so basically you have to get ready for what's coming at you. So you know that you can't control the things that they're going to say, the things that they're you know, how they're going to react, but you can get ready for it and you can steady yourself for it so that it doesn't affect you as much, and it doesn't chip away at your confidence, and it doesn't get under your skin and kind of really, you know, chip away and you and undermine you. So if you kind of visualize a wave, you know, when you're at the beach and you see the big wave coming in, you kind of steady yourself like that and you go, here it comes, right? That's what you've got to visualize when you're still, particularly if you're still living in the same home as your abusive partner. You know that flurry of words is going to be coming right at you. You know they're going to be criticizing you. You know that they're going to be having a go at you for whatever you've just done wrong. But instead of getting upset by it, you just have to steady yourself and go, yep, here it comes. Yep, that's what I was expecting. Yep, well, you know, you can say what you want, but it doesn't mean that I have to believe it. So you kind of brave that wave and you kind of feel that wave of words coming and just washing over you, and then it's gone, it's disappeared, right? It's not soaked under your skin. You just kind of take a deep breath and you carry on, right? Because you have to become very tough. You have to, you know, develop a really tough skin and a tough kind of mental attitude to get through it. You have to treat it like it's a bit of a project, you know, a bit of a project plan. You've got an end goal and you've got to get to that end goal no matter what.
And that visualization is probably really useful, isn't it? And I know I use things like that quite a lot with my clients as well. One that I use quite often, which is actually really similar, is around being you're in charge of your ship, and you need to keep your hands on the wheel of your ship and steer your ship through the storms that might come, through the calm patches, and through the really rough seas that perhaps come some days, and keeping in control of your ship's quite a similar kind of analogy, isn't it?
Yeah.
And use all the resources that you have to create a protective shield around yourself.
Absolutely, yeah, because you can't stop them from saying those words. You know, they're going to keep doing that because they know what normally works for them. They know what normally makes you back down. They know what normally silences you, or allows them to get their own way. So, you know, it's just like, you know, living with a bully. You know, when you talk about bullying, bullies want a reaction, so you don't give them one. You know, if they're trying to provoke you, you do the opposite. You stay completely calm. Now, sometimes you do have to be careful when you're dealing with somebody who's controlling, because sometimes when they see that their normal kind of behavior isn't having the same reaction, that can also cause them to feel quite frustrated. So, you know, you do have to be careful and you do have to watch yourself. But
so are there any particular tips that you have for making sure that you know, keep yourself safe while you're, I mean, I always say to my clients, you need to plan this. Tips to make sure that you can keep yourself safe while you're in the process of planning, you know, assuming that you've now grounded yourself and you're strong enough to do it, how you can keep yourself safe in that period of time while you're planning the exit.
So if you sense that things are escalating, you know, maybe your partner is having a rant at you and you're not reacting, and actually they're getting quite wound up about it all, just walk away, right? Just say, you know, I can't discuss this with you right now, or I'm not talking to you. I'm going to take some time out, and you walk away into a different part of the house, a different room, or you make an excuse to leave the house, you know, oh, I forgot, you know, I need to go and get some milk for dinner or something, and you just get yourself away from them and give them time to calm down and kind of de-escalate. If things are so difficult that you actually don't feel able to stay in your own home because you feel really unsafe, there are other options. You know, you can go and stay at a friend's for a night. You could, you know, call the police. You can, you know, we can look into other options to keep you safe away if you feel really kind of that it's just too difficult. Sometimes, you know, from a professional's perspective, staying in the family home can be the right thing to do, kind of legally and financially and, you know, practically, but you have to put your safety first. That's the thing. So if you feel really unsafe in your own home, then, you know, you can't stay. You can't stay. You've either got to call somebody to come and get your partner or your ex-partner out of the property, or you've got to take yourself away.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned earlier in when we were first talking about the emotional impact of post-separation abuse and post-splitting abuse. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that might show up? So, you know, perhaps even once your divorce is all finalised, and you mentioned in your own case, what are some of the main ways in which that post-separation abuse shows up?
So it's well, it's a huge emotional roller coaster. You know, some days you're going to be feeling really strong and focused, and, you know, realize that it was the right decision, and you'll feel like you can handle everything. And then other days you will probably feel quite crushed and quite hopeless, and, you know, maybe even depressed. And, you know, I've got clients that are suicidal at times because they just feel completely overwhelmed by everything. The trick is to not get to that point where you feel like, you know, everything's kind of coming down on you. Life is difficult in the early stages of separating from somebody like this, and just having some strategies and having some support around you can make all the difference. You have to recognize that you are dealing with somebody that is very difficult, somebody that does want to punish you for ending the relationship, because you've effectively done the thing that they never thought you would do. You know, you've left or you've ended that relationship, and so they haven't got that control over you anymore. So they're going to try and find some way to punish you or some way to make your life more difficult. The trick is to know how to manage them so that their behaviour doesn't impact on you as much.
Yeah, so
it's
kind of managing your own responses, isn't it? Because, you know, you can't control what they're going to do to a degree anyway. You know, they might be doing things that are, well, often predictably unpredictable. What are some of the strategies that people who are watching could maybe use when they're in that situation to manage their own responses to their ex-partner's abuse?
So I think in the early days, you've got to just literally manage one moment to the next moment and one day to the next day. Try not to let your thoughts snowball into, well, what if my ex carries on doing this for the next 5 years? You know, what if this happens to my children? You know, they can be unpredictable, but actually a lot of their behavior is very predictable, which actually makes it very useful as somebody that's trying to separate, particularly if you've got support from somebody that really has worked in this field, because we know the things that they're going to do next. You know, we can predict ahead of time. And if you can start to get more proactive rather than being reactive with them, you will feel a lot more in control. You'll feel a lot less fearful, a lot less stressed, a lot less overwhelmed, because you will know how to deal with them. So, you know, one of the key things that you can do in those early days is shut down the communication with them, because, like I said, their voice is very loud, you know, inside your head, and you're still remembering the things that they've said to you. You know, they're going to be pulling everything out the bag to try and get things back to normal. So they're going to be crying and pleading and promising and threatening and all of this stuff in those early days because they're desperate. So you've got to shut that communication right down and say, no, I'm not talking to you, you know, at the moment, you know, or maybe, you know, we'll go and see some solicitors, or, you know, this, we can have this as an interim arrangement with the children, but you keep it very factual, very basic, very brief. Don't get involved in the emotional side.
Yeah, every time you give something emotional, where you give another vulnerability for them to use against you. Yeah. Okay. You mentioned children as well just now. So you know, a lot of people who are in this position have probably got children who are living in the house as well. How can you, or what are some strategies perhaps that you can use to help your children perhaps deal with this, or to, you know, what are the children likely to be feeling, and what's the best approach to take?
So after separation, the children are, like you are, going to have a whole mix of emotions. You know, sometimes they're going to be upset, sometimes they're going to be okay, sometimes they're going to be stressed, they're going to be worried. Children tend to take on a lot of responsibility as well for their parents, so they'll be worried about the other parent. They will be maybe fearful of the other parent as well, maybe fearful about, again, what life is going to be like now. So they'll have all of those emotions going around. So I think, again, in the early days, it's about opening up the communication with your children, obviously depending on their age as well. You know, you don't want to be oversharing with the children. You don't want to make them overly worried about things. But just being honest and saying, look, you know, mummy and daddy, you know, can't live together anymore. You know, things will be better. But we're just trying to figure it all out right now. So just kind of using very kind of basic, simple language. You don't want to be blaming the other parent, because, you know, no matter what they've done, they're still, you know, the parent of your children, right? And your child is still going to love them. So you want to be the bigger person and the calmer person, and just say, look, you know, I'm here if you're worried. You know, talk about it, you know, talk to your teacher about it, or talk to, you know, whoever they've got a really good close bond with, outside of, you know, outside of you. And just allowing them that space to work through those emotions. And there's lots of tools and strategies that, you know, we can use with children who are really struggling with anxiety and anger and those kind of things. The thing to remember with children is, if they are acting out, they're acting out because you are their safe space. And if they're acting out, it's because they're struggling. So anything that you can do to help them manage and feel a bit more in control of those big emotions is going to help them.
Yeah, I always think, you know, helping your children to be able to name those emotions and put a label on them, or draw them out, or act them out with their toys or whatever, is always helpful to get it out from their heads and out into the open. And then you can start the, you know, it's a first step, being able to deal with your emotions, isn't it? To actually recognise what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And for younger children, it's hard for them to articulate how they feel sometimes. So you can use different kind of resources. I use these things called mood stars for young children, and they're like little fluffy yellow stars, and they've got different faces on them. And so, you know, they can pick a star and they can put it on the board, and so they don't actually have to say, mummy, I'm feeling really sad. They can just literally put the star on there, and so you've got an insight into how they're feeling. And if you kind of build that into like your daily routine, it doesn't become a big thing, all right?
Yeah, makes total sense. I had a client once who did wasn't quite the same, but sort of similar. She had a big Post-it notes, and every morning she and the children would write a word on their Post-it note for their intention for how they wanted to be that day. So sometimes it would be, I want to be brave, or I want to be smiley, or I want to be funny, or whatever it was. And then they would put that on the wall and keep that as an intention for the day. But I think it was really lovely. It just starts the day off in a really good way, I think. Yeah. So we mentioned, or you mentioned much earlier, harassment and things like that. So let's assume now that we're you're somebody who's now living separately, but the abuse is continuing and there's harassment. What are some of the ways in which that might show up, and what advice can we give people who are watching that are facing that kind of thing?
Okay, so harassment can be through constant communication, right? So bombarding you with emails, text messages, WhatsApp messages, you know, it may be under the guise of, you know, child contact, but maybe, you know, this much of the email is about the child contact, and actually this much of the email is just, you know, criticizing your parenting and, you know, everything else. That's quite difficult to deal with in terms of harassment, you know, from a criminal perspective, because it is related to the children. Whereas if somebody is turning up at your property, if they are making threats to you, that kind of thing, that's where you could potentially involve the police, and that person could be given a warning, or you could go and get a non-molestation order, for example, to try and stop that behaviour and shut it down. Again, it's about having good boundaries, but if their behaviour is becoming incessant, it's you feeling like it's pestering you, it's really kind of emotionally draining you or frightening you, then absolutely, you know, keep a log of it all. You definitely need to keep evidence of everything: text messages, emails, WhatsApps, all those kind of things, and report it either to a solicitor or to the police or to your local domestic abuse organisation or to your coach or whoever's supporting you, but to a professional or a social worker or whoever's involved. You've got to shine a light on that pattern of behaviour to try and put a stop to it. Because it's not fair that you should feel harassed. You know, you're entitled to separate from somebody if you don't want to be in that relationship anymore. It doesn't mean that they have a right to continuously harass you and make you feel bad.
Yeah, I don't know whether Jan or Katie have anything that they want to add in to that particular point in terms of harassment and non-molestation orders and things.
Yeah, I completely echo what Caron said about keeping a log. Speaking to the police, you know, a solicitor, to get a warning letter sent. All of those things are available to you as individuals to protect yourself. If you have got evidence of domestic violence having taken place, these are things that you will be able to do with the support of legal aid as well. So it doesn't necessarily mean financially you're going to be put at a disadvantage by protecting yourself. I think the one thing that I always say to clients, if at any point you or your children are in danger and you're in fear of danger, you know, don't hesitate to call the police. That is what they are there for. It is better that you are slightly phone, quick to ring the police rather than, failing to do so and, something happening. So your GP, will be able to provide you with some support if you're experiencing, stress or anything as a result of the harassment or the domestic abuse that you are faced with. And again, as Caron said, there's many charities and organisations who are available to provide you with support or signpost you.
Thank you. I know that mentioning your GP there as well, I've had a few clients in the past who are worried or scared to actually report the stress that they're under to the GP, fear that their ex-partner will then use that to try and prove that they're not being a good parent at that particular point in time. I think it's really important to know that that is not the case, that actually going for help from your GP and acknowledging that with your GP and getting the help that you need is absolutely what you need to do. Nodding.
Yeah. I don't think sometimes it can be worse if you have, you are suffering from stress or you are struggling and you're not getting that help because you're not, protecting yourself and indeed the children. You're never going to be criticised by the court for reaching out and asking for help and support. the fact that you can acknowledge that, you know, that there are maybe, you know, some issues that you need to work on, or that you need some help, is far better than denying it and not doing anything about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
And people who are abusive and controlling always threaten those things as a way of isolating you further. So they will say, don't speak up to your GP, don't speak to your social worker, don't, you know, tell anybody about what's going on, because this will happen to you. You know, and that puts that fear into you. But you should never, you know, don't listen to them, listen to yourself, right? Listen to the professionals, right? We're all saying there's nothing wrong with going to the GP. If you're shining a light on the behaviour that, you know, you're subjected to, that's a good thing that somebody knows about it. The more help and support you can get, the better.
Yeah, and building that strong support team around you is crucially important at a time when you really need help from as many different areas as you possibly can get. So yeah, okay. We haven't really touched much on financial abuse as well, and I know that's one of the things that we were going to cover in this. So could you explain a little bit more, Caron, about financial abuse and how that might show up, and particularly post separation or post divorce?
Okay, so the two ways that they can usually still try to keep that control once you've left is through the children and through the finances. So they may make the financial separation quite difficult and protracted. They might be quite obstructive in the process. So, you know, not signing their Form E and, you know, completing that properly, and not agreeing to the, you know, the value of the property. They may not pay child maintenance, or they may agree with you how much they're going to pay for that, and then they'll backtrack or make excuses as to why they can't pay. And you know, it can be big amounts of money where they're trying to keep that control, but it can also be the little day-to-day things, you know, like school uniform and who pays for that, and you know, who pays for the school trips, and all of that kind of stuff. So they will try and keep that bit of control wherever they can, even if it's completely irrational, even if the other professionals and their legal professionals are telling them that they're being completely unfair, because they just want to, again, punish you, to make your life difficult, and they just want to win. They want those little wins as they go along, because it kind of makes them feel better about their situation. So
what can you do if that's the situation that you're in? What are the strategies and things that you might be able to use to help yourself?
So definitely getting professional advice, you know, on your financial situation, not just your short-term finances, but your longer-term financial future as well, and what that might look like, you know, with that kind of legal separation. You know, looking into your rights in terms of your finances, what you would, you know, what you can expect, what you may be legally entitled to. And then also thinking about how you have some kind of formal agreement, because if you have a verbal agreement with somebody who's controlling, you can never plan anything, because if you're expecting a certain amount of money to come into your account every month, you know, you're always going to be anxious, thinking, are they going to pay me, or are they going to pay me the full amount, or are they not? So you need some kind of structure there. So whether that is a consent order, whether that is going through the child maintenance service, you know, so that you get that regular payment to you all the time, then at least you know where you are. So you may have a little bit less money than you thought, or maybe a bit less money to live on than you had before, but at least it's your money, it's in your control, you can spend it how you want, you don't have to ask permission for how you spend it. That's really key to being able to move on and recover longer term.
Yeah, that kind of sense of having some freedom back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's really crucial, isn't it? And so what are some of the, in terms of moving on, once you've kind of got that freedom, perhaps, what are some of the things that you can do to start creating a new life for yourself and making sure that you don't remain kind of tied to that old story, or that what happened to you in the past? How can we start to break free of the kind of the emotional ties, really, that might hang around longer than we want them to?
Yeah. So some of the quick and simple things that you can do in those early days, which will also help you stay emotionally strong, are to do things differently to the things that you used to do with your ex-partner. So even if that means shopping in different supermarkets, shopping on different days of the week, buying different foods, you might want to change up your home a little bit. You might want to get rid of some of the things that actually you didn't really like in your home, but you were forced, to have in your home. You might want to change just simple things like changing your bedding or changing the position of the bed in the bedroom to make it feel different. If you can change some of these things physically, it actually distances you emotionally from your ex-partner. So this is your new life now, and you're moving forwards. Okay? So one of the things I did in the early days, without really thinking too much about it, was I threw away my contraceptive pills, because I thought, well, I'm not going to need them now. So there's no point taking them. So I threw them in the bin, and I was like, yes, I don't need to take them anymore. And I bought some jeans, some skinny jeans that I'd never been allowed to wear. I went and had my hair cut. I went and got my nose pierced. So I did like quite a few things that I had never been allowed to do before.
I think that's a really good thing to do, isn't it? I went and got a tattoo.
Yeah, lots of people do. Because it's a way of signifying your new life. It is a bit of a kind of rite of passage kind of thing. You might want to do something as drastic as that. You might just want to buy some pink cushions, able to have pink cushions or something. But it's just trying to do things differently and tell yourself that you're no longer there now. You're in a different place, you're in a different mindset, you're in a safe space, and things are going to get better.
Yes, yeah. And also to get rid of some of those things that perhaps have very negative emotional memories attached to them. Some of the items perhaps in the house that have got a specific memory attached to them, something like that you can get rid of those things and perhaps buy new. And I always say to my clients, if you possibly can, you're still in the same house, get yourself a new bed, a new mattress, and kind of starting afresh with new stuff to sleep on, where you're resting overnight and where your brain's processing. I think it's a really healthy thing to do if you can afford to do so. Yeah. And changing your clothes as well. I don't mean like on a daily basis like we all do. I mean changing style perhaps that you wear, or the colours that you wear, and dressing in a way that helps you to feel the way you want to feel, rather than the way you perhaps maybe do actually feel inside.
And it's a way of rediscovering who you are as well, because when you've been in a controlling relationship, you get told who you can speak to, you get told what to wear, you get told how to talk and what you can and can't say. So you have to rediscover yourself again, and that's going to take a while, and it can actually feel quite daunting to not really know who you are. But if you start testing yourself a little bit and you start trying new things and realizing that actually this is you, and this is who you are, and this is what you like, it's actually really empowering the more that you do it.
How can you start to kind of rediscover who you are and what you like and all of those things? What are your top tips for doing that? Because that's a really lovely thing to start doing. As you said, it can be really scary at the start, when if you've been in the relationship for a long time, you're used to doing things the way your partner wanted to, or joining in with their things and not being allowed to do your own. Where could you start? That's quite a simple first step.
Definitely trying to reconnect with other people is good, to have those kind of trusted people around you. So maybe if you've been forced to distance yourself from close friends or family, just, you know, getting yourself back out there is really useful, because and if you can be honest with those people as well, if you can say, look, I know I haven't been in touch very often, the reason is because, you know, that relationship wasn't great, however, I am out now, you know, I need your help, you know, I'd really like it if we could just have a call once a week, or if we could go for a coffee or something, would that be all right? You know, though, if they are good friends and family, you know, that you are going to have in your life longer term, they will be more than happy to support you, right? They will understand. And it can feel quite daunting trying to you know, pick up the phone and explain your situation, but once you've done it, you're no longer protecting your ex as well, and you can be honest with them, and just going out for coffee or going out for dinner will really be a massive confidence boost for you. It will show you that actually there is life out there, you know, because you probably haven't done any of those things for a long time. But don't put yourself under pressure either. Just think to yourself, right, I'll go. If I can only stay half an hour, that's fine, I can go away again, right? And maybe next time I will stay a little bit longer, but you will probably find that you surprise yourself and you will stay for the whole thing, because you will really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, you know, to connect with people that you've had to lost touch with. Have you got any advice around, I know I've had some clients who perhaps they've got mutual friends with their ex, you know, they've been in a big group, and it can be quite upsetting when some of that group take your ex's side or become some of your ex's sort of flying monkeys, if you like. How can people deal with those friends who disappoint them in the way that they react to the separation?
It's difficult, isn't it? It's difficult for friends and family who are kind of caught in the middle of it all, and sometimes they don't know, you know, whose side of the story is the right side, you know. But if they are siding with your ex, it's probably because your ex has been, you know, telling them their version of events. You can tell them your version of events and let them make up their own decision, or you can just step away from them a little bit, just back off from them a little bit, and just think, well, actually, you know, the only people that I need around me right now are the people that believe me, that support me, that are there for me. And if that's not them, then maybe they just have to go for now. And it might not be forever. They may actually come back to you further down the line, maybe when they realise that your ex's side of the story doesn't quite add up, and your ex starts to show their true colours to them, or they may still stay away, and that's, you know, that's up to them. You've got to think, once you separate from your ex, that's your time to think about who you want around you then. And you only want positive people around you. You don't want people that are there to just get the juicy gossip from what's going on. You don't want people that are just going to bring you down and make you feel negative. You want people that are going to boost you up, that are going to help you.
Your radiators.
Yeah.
So it's like this radiator friend who every time you see them, you come away feeling better.
Yes.
Rather than those drain friends who drain you, or perhaps they're the drama llama who, you know, actually you just get this feeling that really they're only in it to get the gossip, and maybe even share it back to your ex-partner. Yeah,
you've got to protect yourself and put yourself first, not everybody else. So that's where you've got to kind of flip things around and think, are they doing me any good? If they're not, then they have to go.
I always say to start to notice how you feel when you have spent time with that person. Do you feel better than before you went, or do you feel worse? And sort of really listen to your body and what your gut's telling you about those people.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the other things that I often tell my clients, and if you do this too, is to educate yourself about what it is you've been through, because I know that when you've been in an abusive relationship for quite a long time, it's a very slow burn. Sometimes, you know, if somebody treated you that badly on our first date, you wouldn't say. But it's the slow building and building and building, like little grains of sand on a make a little, you know, to make a mountain over time. So I often encourage people to do some reading around what happened, to understand some of the terms that we use, so that they can educate themselves about what happened to them, and also understand that it isn't their fault.
Yeah,
it's all actually, this is the abuser's behaviour. This is not your fault.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because most people that are in abusive and controlling relationships don't actually realise that what they're experiencing is abuse until much further down the line. And even after they've separated, I had a lady say to me this week, oh, I've got your book and I've been reading it, and actually I'm recognising quite a lot of things now that I hadn't recognised before. And she's managed to get herself out of that relationship, and she's a bit, you know, she's more settled now. And now is the time when she's actually in a good headspace, and she's got that capacity to actually sit down, read the book, understand it, and process what she's been through. When you're in that kind of crisis of separation, at that point, you haven't really got capacity to be.
Your brain's too busy isn't it, keeping you safe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have capacity to take on all that knowledge, but it can be really helpful in terms of future relationships, can't it? Understand what happened in this one, so that you can watch out for those kind of red flag behaviours next time.
That's it. The key is to learn from it and make sure it doesn't happen again.
No, absolutely. I don't know if there are any, we've got about 10 minutes left or so now. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I don't know if the chat is the chat working now, Sally, or is it? Okay, so if you've got any questions, if you're watching, please put them in the Q&A. The chat doesn't seem to be working for some reason today. So if you've got any questions for Caron, please put them in the Q&A. I'm just, opening up to other people who are here. So Steph and Joanna and Katie, if you've got any questions as well for Caron that you want to ask, please do feel free to fire away. You find, Caron, that you often work very closely with the lawyers that your clients are working with? Do you ever work kind of in a very in a real holistic way, so that you communicate between you and the lawyer and the client? And I have that sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes with the really vulnerable ones, where there's so much going on, it's really important. It's particularly if we're at the point of supporting where they're due to be separating from that person. It's so important to have that holistic approach, because we've got to do quite a comprehensive safety plan with some of the clients in terms of how they exit that relationship, because the point of ending that relationship and up until around 3 months afterwards is actually the most risky time. So if you are worried that somebody's behaviour is going to escalate and it could become physical, then or even if you're worried about things like false accusations and or worried about the safety of the children, etc., it's really important that the legal professional speaks with somebody who understands about that kind of safety planning, etc. Because if you don't manage that correctly, it could all kind of blow up and be quite difficult and unsafe. So
absolutely, I completely agree with that, Caron. We've done it before, where we've worked with individuals like yourself to create that exit plan and to have that strategy in place, and to make sure that we've got all the documentation ready to go in terms of sorting out things such as a normalisation order or an occupation order, sorting out interim financial assistance if, for example, the victim is the one that doesn't have their own income. So I think having that holistic approach and getting, not trying to be, a jack of all trades and a master of none, but recognizing that there are people such as yourself and Claire and Steph who obviously all add their kind of own areas of expertise, and that holistic approach is what we find works really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important to have the right team, so that you've got the right people to ask the right questions and give the right advice at the right time. As things move through your case and so on. definitely. Caron, is there anything else that I haven't asked you about that you wanted to bring to the session today? Is there anything else that, what would your top tip be for anybody who's in this situation? The top three, perhaps.
So definitely tap into all of the different types of professional advice. The more people that understand your situation, the more supported you're going to feel, the more in control you're going to feel. It's all about taking control back and doing it safely. That's the key to recovery, really, and to being able to move on. Getting the right support, but also accepting that you are the person that is responsible for your own happiness. We can all advise you and we can all support you, but you have to be the one to do it. And that can be a tough decision to make, but just know that if there is there's abuse in a relationship, it's not going to get better. Right? If you're in a controlling relationship, it's only going to get worse the longer you stay. It's never going to get better. So, think about how much time you're prepared to wait before you make those changes. Try and get your plan in place as much as you can. If you are going to end that relationship, get all your ducks in a row as much as you can, and then take that leap, because you won't regret it. It can be tough, but actually, once you end that relationship, there's hope. There's hope for things to get better, right? And it can get better. I'm living proof. I got out after 10 years, and yes, it was tough, but I did it. And life is, a million times better than it was before. And it's the same for lots and lots of other people that have come out of these kind of relationships. You can do it, and life can be 100% better.
Brilliant. There's a question actually that's just come up into the Q&A. What would your tips be for leaving with children, if that can be an extra barrier, so to make sure that you're all safe?
Yes, so you've got different options. It's difficult without knowing all the details to be able to advise, but there are different options. So if you really need to flee because you're so unsafe, then there are refuges where you can go. And people always think, refuge is like a last option, right? Yes, potentially it can be like a final option. Nobody really wants to uproot and leave everything behind, but actually they can be really beneficial because it's a safe space. It gives you room to just decompress, just not have to make any major decisions, to get that really intensive support that you need, and then think about what you want to do. So don't discount refuge. You can get the orders, like Joanna was saying, the non-molestation order, the occupation orders, which will remove the abuser from your property, so that you can actually stay within your own home and keep the children in their own home, keep the children at school, etc. And that's, if you can do those things and do whatever you can to stay in your own home, obviously that's the best solution, because you're keeping that support network around you, you're keeping that stability. Or you might just want to temporarily go and stay with friends or family. It might be, I say temporarily, it might be a few months, might be a year, right? It may mean that you are having, your children are having to share a bedroom for the first time. Life may not be ideal, but if it means that you're safe and you've got a better chance of recovery and you've got that support network around you, then it's worth it. And all the other stuff, the financial separation and, how you're going to manage the child contact, that can all be figured out as you go.
Yeah, one thing at a time. I was talking to the client just yesterday about this, try not to leap too far ahead. Let's just take this one step at a time. What's the next thing you've got to do? What's the next thing to do? What's the next thing to do? Yeah.
So think about what the priority is. If your priority is your safety, you need to think about how you can get yourself into a safer space.
Also, I think with the children, there are other protective measures that you can put in place in terms of, for example, a prohibited steps order. So asking the court to get to make an order that prevents your husband or wife or partner, and from removing the children from your care, from your school, without further order of the court. And that potentially is something that you would want to do if you were, you know, putting in place an exit strategy, for example. And we've done that, and then we've worked with the schools to, you know, to allow, you know, the individual to collect the children early without notifying the other parent, so that they can, you know, get out, get to the safe space, and then all the documents can be served on the individual. So the non-molestation order, the occupation order, the prohibited steps order, etc. So that's done whilst you and the children are away. And I think what's important with the non-molestation order is that there's automatically a power of arrest that is attached to them. So if there is any breach of the non-molestation order, then the police will get called, and then the individual who is the respondent in that non-molestation order will be arrested. And they are a very helpful tool to prevent your ex from coming, say, in the remit of the property. I've recently obtained a non-molestation order that prevents an individual from entering an entire town, which is rare, but was the protection that my client required. And the court, obviously, where there's children involved in particular, will take those steps to make sure that children and parent, you know, mum, dad, whoever, are safe.
Thank you very much, Joanna. There's another question that's popped up in the Q&A. So would the lawyers please comment on whether there's any reason not to use the new no-fault grounds of divorce over other grounds? So I think there's a legal misunderstanding there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, ultimately, there are no other grounds anymore. The only way that you can divorce somebody is on the no-fault basis. It's to encourage parties to, you know, two adults, you know, to make that decision that the marriage is over without attributing blame and potentially making what is already a difficult situation even more difficult. There is absolutely no impact on the financial proceedings or the Children Act proceedings by using that no fault. It is merely just trying to allow adults to take that decision that the marriage is over without having to play the blame game. So in short, there are no other grounds other than the no fault ground, and you will not be prejudiced in any way by, you know, saying that there is no fault. And if you have anything else to add, Katie, I'm sure everyone's my voice.
Thanks, John. I was just going to say, in terms of that, even if you feel that, you know, you want to, with the obviously previous system, it allowed you to rely on some of the behaviours that you may want to raise with the court in financial proceedings or children proceedings. It doesn't stop you doing that. So although you may file on the current system, it doesn't stop you raising behaviours in respect of the finances or children matters during those proceedings. So if there is a controlling behaviour in terms of finances or behaviour that is so serious that the court would need to consider that in financial proceedings and or children proceedings, you are still able to rely upon that. So I think, you know, don't be fearful that if you are going to file on the new system, as Joanna says, there is no other option. You can still then seek to rely upon some of that behaviour in the financial and children proceedings. And just one further point, sorry Claire, in terms of as well, you know, leaving with the children, I reiterate the points raised by, you know, Joanna, in terms of a non-molestation order and occupation order so that you can stay in the home. But, you know, don't be afraid to pick up the phone and phone the police. I dealt with criminal law for a very long time, and I know a lot of people will say, well, the police will tell me it's a family matter or they can't do anything. You know, push. Be persistent. If you need that assistance, say to them, you know, you want something done, because also there is then bail conditions that can be placed upon that individual, which will stop them from coming to the family home at all. Exactly the same in terms of a non-molestation order, you've got the power of arrest, but the same if they breach bail conditions, then of course they're going to be arrested and brought back before the police station or the court. So it's another protective measure, but just insist, be persistent. Because with the police at the moment, you know, some of them will be very proactive, but unfortunately, we've also all seen cases where they haven't been. And it's a case of really, really being persistent. And again, having assistance by other, obviously, family solicitors and other agencies, very similar to obviously, you know, all of our guests today, so that you have that support network around you.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Katie. That brings us to the end of our time today. So I'm really grateful, Caron. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us. It's all massively informative, and I hope that everyone watching has got the information that they needed. So we'll send out an email in the next day or two with details of all of us on that email, so that you can contact any of us should you wish to. And all that remains is to say thank you so much for coming, and see you all again next time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.